In this tutorial, we will be demonstrating how easy it is to manage printing within your virtual desktop environment using the VDI ToolKit. We will also look at some of the alternatives and their associated pitfalls. Lastly, we will demonstrate how the VDI ToolKit overcomes those pitfalls. Okay, so one alternative with print is using group policy. Well, group policy unfortunately has some inherent problems when being utilized within a virtual desktop environment. Using group policy for managing print can regrettably slow down login times, and user login times are often a pain point for new organizations implementing VDI, and everything that can be done to reduce login times should be done. Group policy also requires using full UNC paths when setting up for print, which is prone to error when both initially setting up and modifying in the future. Group policy also does not use a robust rules engine that is aware of all aspects of your virtual desktop environment. This means it is not client aware, and group policy rules cannot be based off of the client. Furthermore, due to its limited scope, it cannot be used for location-based printing. Due to group policy's use of full UNC paths, it also makes print server migration a painful task if the new print server will have a different, fully qualified domain name. All of these pitfalls make the task of managing print with group policy more difficult and harder on system engineers. So many other alternatives do exist as well. These solutions are usually narrow in scope and that print is all they handle, which leads to more management applications that system engineers have to utilize to handle different management tasks within their virtual desktop environment. They also are normally expensive for the limited capabilities they offer. Others also fall victim to needing full UNC paths for the print rules. Some even require the MAC addresses of the clients to perform location-based printing, which is burdensome when clients can get replaced or repurposed throughout an organization. These same issues lead to a difficult task when the time comes to perform a print server migration. And lastly, for the same reasons as group policy, this leads to increased difficulty in the management of printing within the virtual desktop environment for system engineers. So let's talk about how the VDI ToolKit tries to differentiate itself from others when dealing with print. Well, first, it has zero impact on login times. Furthermore, it does not require the use of UNC paths, MAC addresses of the clients, etc. This helps alleviate errors that can occur when initially setting up or modifying rules. It also supports location-based printing. It also uses a robust rules engine that fully understands the concept of the client and many other variables within your virtual desktop environment. Going over the full capabilities of the rules engine is beyond the scope of this tutorial, so for further information, please watch the video tutorial on rules. Due to not using full UNC paths, it also makes print server migration a breeze, as we'll demonstrate in the tutorial. This all makes for much easier management by system engineers within your organization. So why is all this important? Why do we need this flexibility with print? Well, let's go ahead and give an example. Please note this is just a limited example of the need for such flexibility and is not all encompassing, as there are so many use cases. Let's say we have a physician who works for a hospital where VDI is implemented. Now let's say that the physician sees patients on all 3 floors, and after seeing patients on each floor, roams their virtual desktop to a client on that floor and needs to print items out of the electronic medical record for hospital staff on that floor. We would in turn expect that each time he logs into a new client, that he has the printer map for that floor. The VDI ToolKit's print management handles this with ease. Now imagine that the physician is back at home and is called about a patient for any one of these floors. The physician then logs into the virtual desktop from their home computer so they can update the electronic medical record and print anything they needed to print. We would then expect that the physician would have the necessary printer's map so they could still print to the floor they need to from home. With the power of the VDI ToolKit's rules engine, this is done easily. Up next, we will demonstrate managing print using the VDI ToolKit. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And first, what we want to do is go ahead and open up the management console. And I have that running on a virtual desktop here. I'll go ahead and open it. Okay, once open, I'm going to go ahead and expand it. And we will navigate to Rules, Rule Items, Printer, And we can see here that we have no PrintServer PrinterShare set up. So how this works basically is we add print servers and then it synchronizes the print shares from those print servers. So then we can then associate them with rules and map those printers for virtual desktop sessions based off whatever our rule criteria is. So first thing is I'm going to go ahead and add a print server. I do that by clicking the plus up here. I'll give it a name, description, and fully qualified domain name. Okay. And then let's see here. Okay, once that's done, I'll go ahead and click add. We can see it's added our print server now. So now we need to synchronize it. And just so you know, synchronization actually happens automatically. And there's a schedule for that, but we can also trigger a manual sync by clicking right here. So I'll go ahead and sync. It'll ask for a confirmation. I'll hit OK. Once done, we can see it's added the printer shares from that print server. And just so you know, those are searchable, and you can actually right click on any printer and you can view details on it, or you can actually right click and view rule associations, which will show you every rule that references that printer. So that way it makes it easier for you to go back and find where a printer is mapped, like what rules it's associated with. Okay, so once that's done, now we're going to navigate to rules, session rules, then printer. And as we can see, we have no rules currently. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to demonstrate a couple of things and how this works. So I'm going to create a default rule, which adds 2 printers. And then I'm going to create another rule and sets one as a default. And then I'm going to create another rule, which actually maps a 3rd printer and also changes what the default printer is by overriding the other. So let's go ahead and create those rules. So first one, we'll give it a name, description, and the first one will be a global rule. And global rule basically means it applies to all sessions. In most cases, you wouldn't do this. I'm just doing it for demonstration purposes. So I'll go ahead and check global rule. I'll hit add. Once I hit add, we'll notice that it'll open up the rule edit window, and we can see our rule information here, and then I can navigate to configuration, and we can go ahead and add our printers. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 printers, and then also I'm going to set the default to test 01. And then once done, I can hit update, and then I can also do a search, and we can see we have our default printer rule. So now I want to set another one, and this will be one that will actually override the default printer for that one. So we'll call this print rule. This one we will not check global rule because I'm going to say I only want it to apply to the user that I'm logging into the virtual desktop with. So I'll go ahead and hit add. We'll notice now that we actually have an option to add qualifiers. For more information on qualifiers and how rules exactly work, please watch the video tutorial on rules. But I will go ahead and just do any qualifier, and I'll add a user, and I'll add the user that I'll be logging in with to the virtual desktop session. So we have that. Now I'll go to configuration, and I'm going to add test printer 03. And then I'll set the default to test printer 03. Also too, since I want this rule to override the other one, I need to give it a higher weight than the other rule. The default rule was set to 0, so I'll go ahead and set this weight to 1. So this one actually takes precedence over the other rule. So now that I'm done configuring the rule, I'll go ahead and hit update. And I can once again do a search, and we can see that I have both rules created here, and the specialized rule has a higher weight. Okay, so now next we can go ahead and minimize this, and what we're going to want to do is go ahead and log into a virtual desktop session. So let's go ahead and do that. So it should have 3 printers mapped, and test printer 03 should be the default with the way that we set up our rules. Okay, once logged in, we can go ahead and confirm that our printer's mapped. Okay, I'll navigate devices and printers. And we can see here that all three printers mapped as we expected, and the default was set to test printer 03. Now, also too, just so you know, and to show you, we can actually navigate to the client in the sys tray and left click on it, and we can navigate to rules, then expand session modification rules, and we'll see here that we have two printer rules, and we can expand that as well too, and we can see that we have our specialized print rule, and it's displaying first, obviously, because it had a higher weight, and it shows us our printer and that it's successfully mapped and it's set to the default. If we highlight our mouse over, we can get details about the printer. Also, if we highlight our mouse over the rule, we can get details about the rule. Now, the default print rule also was meant to set default printer, which was a different one, which was supposed to be test 01. And if we actually we'll see that it's successfully mapped, but it will have a red X next to it. And if we highlight our mouse over it, it will say a higher weight rule has default. So it was not set to the default rule, but the printer share still successfully mapped. Okay. So next, so that's pretty much it with that. Now, what I do want to show is how easy it is to do a print server migration. And we can simulate that by actually going ahead and changing the host name of our print server. So I'll go ahead and do that right now. And I'll just change it to this 02. I'll hit OK. And it will prompt us to restart. So I will go ahead and restart. Okay, so our print server has been renamed, and that's just kind of like to do a little simulation basically of what it would be like to migrate print servers. So now what I can do is go back to the management console and navigate back to rules, rule items, and printer. And then I can actually, so obviously this is wrong and this will no longer work, right? Because that print server no longer exists technically. So what we can do is we can actually take and hit edit, and we can go ahead and update this information. So I'll go ahead and change it. All right, so we've completed updating that. So I'll go ahead and click update. We can see it's updated here. Now we'll notice that our printer shares here, we still see the SRV print 01, right? Now, once I do a resynchronization afterwards, so if I resync, we'll notice that all of these have updated now. Now, this is real important because if changes happen or things like that, see, normally in scenarios where you're using group policy or some of these other things out there, you have to put the full UNC path. If you ever need to migrate and you want to change the name of the print server or anything like that, you have to go edit every one of those full UNC paths that were in all those rules, which depending on what you're working in can be very tedious. So just to show you that this did not break our rules, we can actually go back and navigate to rules, session rules, and we can navigate to printer, and we have our rules here. And if I go ahead and hit edit and go to configuration, we'll see that it has automatically updated our rules as well. So these rules are working and we didn't have to go back and edit any rules or anything. So it's good to go. User logs in, you did a migration, there's no issues, you don't have to change any UNC paths, any rules, or anything of that nature. So I hope this tutorial has been useful for you, and thank you.